محمد الهلال. Welcome to our lecture number 9 today. As we have agreed last time, we are going to have two lectures of grammar each time, followed by two lectures of interaction books. So this is our ninth lecture. So today we need to deal with the simple present tense. So basically these are the topics we are going to go through, from form and basic meaning of the simple present tense. Then we have to deal with the verb after the third person singular pronouns, which is usually followed by an S at the end. Then we talk about the fact that the simple present tense is used to express fact, and then we will have the exercise on page 55. Our fourth section will be talking about the using of frequency adverb. Then we will deal with adverbs used with the verb to be and try to compare verb to be, or basically sentences with verb to be and sentences with main verb, real ordinary kind of verb. Towards section number 6 we will deal with exercise number 9 on page 50. Then we are going to deal with the other issues related to the simple present, like adding the S or ES or IES, and try to understand how this is basically done. Toward the end we will have an exercise on page 63, completing the chart with the correct form of each verb. Then the final section is when we introduce the use of negative in the simple present. So basically the verb after the third person singular pronoun is usually have S or ES depending on the ending of the verb. So if we have he, she, it, which are the three third person pronouns representing the singular, the verb takes an S at the end. These are some examples showing us how the pronouns divided into first person, second person, and third person, and in each case we can see how the verb basically takes an S or stays as it is without any addition in the simple present. So this is an example of the first person. The first person is the pronoun I, which is first person singular, while the pronoun we is the first person plural. So let's see how a verb like, for example, took will be basically used in the simple present with those pronouns. So we say I took, we took. So if you look at the ending of the verb, there is nothing added to the end of the verb. So in the case of the first pronoun, whether it is a singular pronoun or plural pronoun, the verb is not, there is nothing added to the verb at all. Now in the case of the second person, that is the pronoun you, whether it is one singular person we are addressing or a group of people we are addressing, this is the pronoun you. So in the case of this second person pronoun, the verb does not really take anything at the end, so we say you took, without any S at the end. Now moving to the third person subject or third person pronouns, where we have these three pronouns he, she, it, which are the three singular third person singular pronoun he, she, it. Now when the verb is used in the simple present and it is preceded by one of those pronouns, an S is added to the end of the verb. So we say he talks, she talks, it runs. So because it here refers to either an animal or something that is not really human or an object, and so on and so forth. So he talks, she talks, and it runs. Now if you can see, the S is added at the end of the verb so that it indicates that, look, this is basically a third person singular pronoun, in which case you have to have an S at the end of the verb. While in the case of the plural pronoun they, which is a third person pronoun as well, but it is a third person plural pronoun, the verb does not really take any S at the end. The S comes only when the verb is preceded by he, she, it, which we said they are the third person pronouns, the third person singular pronouns, where the S is added at the end of the verb. Now these are some examples showing that the verb after the third person singular pronoun he, she, it has a final S. Look at this sentence. We say the train leaves early morning at 8 o'clock. So the verb that we have here is the verb leave. At the end of this verb we have an S added to the final to the end of the verb, because the subject or the subject of this verb, or the verb, is preceded by one of the third person singular pronoun, or here we have a noun, which is the train. If we replace it by a pronoun, we will get it rather than a plural pronoun. So here we have also a third person pronoun, it, represented here by the word the train. So the train leaves early morning at 8 a.m. Looking at the second example, she always loses her bag. She always loses her bag. Now the verb here is lose, and the subject of the sentence is she. She is one of the third person singular pronouns, so the verb takes an S. She loses her bag. She always loses her bag. Another sentence, every 12 months the earth circles the sun. Now the verb circle is preceded by the word the earth. The earth is a third person singular noun, so it is representing the pronoun it, which means that the verb circle takes an S at the end. Again, another example where we have a plural third person here. They drink tea at breakfast every morning. Now if you look at the verb drink, there is no S added to the verb, simply because the subject of this sentence is they rather than he or she or it, which means we have a third person plural pronoun rather than a third person singular pronoun. So they drink tea at breakfast. Again, this is another example showing a third person singular subject. Sally eats fish every weekend. Sally eats fish every weekend. So again, the subject is Sally. Sally is a third person singular. The verb takes an S at the end. Another sentence, we watch TV every day. The verb that we talk about here is watch, preceded by a first person plural pronoun, we watch. So we don't usually say we watches, because the subject is we is one of the first person plural pronoun. We have only, of course, one first person plural pronoun. Now here is an exercise on page number 55, that is exercise number 3, where we need to choose the correct completion of a sentence. Now if you look at the sentence number 1 that we have here, my mother and father eats breakfast at 7 o'clock every day. Now the subject of the sentence is my father and my mother, which means we have a compound subject. This compound subject is basically takes a plural verb, and because here we have eat and eats, eat is used for any subject that is not third person singular, so it means that we use eat rather than eats, because we have compound subject. That compound subject represents the pronoun they, so they eat breakfast at 7 every day. So the correct answer is eat rather than eats. Question number 2, my mother drinks or drink tea with her breakfast. My mother is a third person singular pronoun, so the verb takes an S, so we would expect my mother drinks tea with her breakfast. Moving to number 3, I take or I takes a bath every morning. I take a bath every morning. So clearly the subject of this sentence is a first person singular pronoun. First person singular pronouns do not take an S at the end, so I take a bath every morning. Moving to sentence number 4, my sister takes a shower every day. My sister takes a shower every day, because the subject is my sister, and my sister is a third person singular noun. I study or I studies English with my friend. I studies or I study English with my friend. The subject again is I, the first person, so it does not take an S. So I study English with my friend. Correct answer is study. Question number 6. We walk to school together every morning. So the verb is walk, and the subject is we, so we do not have an S to the end of the verb, so we walk to school together every morning. Question number 7, my class begins or begin at 9 every day. My class is a third person singular noun, so the verb has to take an S, so My class begins at 9 o'clock every day. Number 8, the bus arrives at 12 p.m. every day. Again, the bus is basically a third person singular noun. If we can replace it by a pronoun, we get it. So it is basically when it precedes the verb. The verb does take an S. So the verb takes an S at the end of the verb, as we have the word arrive here. So the bus arrives at 12 p.m. every day. Now moving to number 9, we eat or we eats in the cafeteria. We eat because first person plural do not take an S. And finally, my friend and I. So we have more than one person in this subject, my friend and I. So we have compound subject represented by the pronoun they. So we have more than one person here. We have a third person plural pronoun, in which case the verb does not take an S. So my friend and I go or goes home at 3 p.m. every afternoon. It is my friend and I go home at 3 p.m. every afternoon. Okay, now the other section we want to deal with in this chapter, in the study of the simple present, is the use of adverbs. And because adverbs in the simple present always refer to something happening more than one time, we call them adverbs of frequently, or basically adverbs of frequency, where the verb is basically modified by these adverbs, and as if it is having the meaning of being repeated more than one time. So if you look quickly, if we have a quick look at those frequency adverbs, they come between the subject and the simple present verb. In other words, we need to know where exactly we have to write or locate, basically write down our adverb of frequency. The adverb comes between the subject and the simple present verb. In other words, it comes immediately after the subject if you don't have anything else, and it does not come after the verb. For example, it has always to be before the verb and after the subject. So if you look at this, these simple examples, so some examples of the frequency adverbs: always, usually, often, sometimes, seldom, rarely, and never. Always, she always eats breakfast. Now if you look at the subject, that is the subject she, and this is the verb eats, the adverb always comes between the subject and the verb. So it comes between the subject and the verb. She always eats the breakfast. We cannot usually say she eats always breakfast, or she or always basically she always eats breakfast. So the adverb comes between the subject and the verb. Moving to the second example, usually, Ahmed usually watches TV. Again, the adverb usually comes immediately after the subject and before the verb. So the place for the adverbs of frequency is between subject and verbs. They come between the subject and the verb. Often, Nadia often comes back late. She arrives late. Sometimes, they sometimes drink coffee at the cafe. There is a spelling mistake here. If you look at the word, excuse me, if you look at the verb, sorry, the verb drink here, it does not have to have an S at the end, simply because the subject is they. So we cannot say they drinks, it is they drank coffee at the cafe. So we go to our presentation again. So they sometimes drink coffee at the cafe. So the adverb of frequency sometimes comes between the subject they and the verb drink. I seldom drink milk. So again, the adverb seldom between I and a drink between the subject and the verb. Rima rarely forgets her homework. So again, rarely is the adverb. It is between the subject and the verb forgets. We never lie to anybody. Never is also functioning here as an adverb, and of course it is coming after the verb and after the subject and before the verb lie. So we never lie to anybody. Okay, now if you look at this rule that can help us understand and remember where to place the adverb, we start with the subject, then followed by the adverb, then the main verb. In other words, the adverb comes before the subject and the main verb. These are examples showing us some incorrect uses of the adverb where it is not really used between the subject and the adverb. We can say, I always remember to do my homework. Look at the adverb always. It is between I, the subject, and remember, the verb. We cannot say, I remember always to do my homework. When there is a star at the beginning of the sentence, it means the sentence is not really grammatical, or at least it is not really acceptable. So we cannot say, I remember always to do my homework. We have to say, I always remember. In other words, the adverb comes before the verb, not after the verb. It has to be before the verb. He usually gets good marks in the exams. He usually gets good marks in the exam. So again, the adverb comes before the verb gets. The sentence will not be acceptable if we say he gets usually good marks in the exam, whereas you can see in this example, he gets usually good marks in the exam. The adverb comes after the verb, and we said it has to come before the verb. Okay, let's move to the following point where we talk about frequency adverbs in the case of the verb to be. So frequency adverbs with verb to be. Frequency adverbs, follow in the sense that they come after am, is, are. Again, if you look at this sentence, frequency adverbs. Here we have a plural subject, but the verb follow has got a spelling mistake or an error here where we do not have to have this is at the end because the sentence is basically have a plural subject. So frequency adverbs follow in the sense that it means they come after the verb to be, which can be either am or is or are. Okay, going back. So frequency adverbs follow, which means they come after. They don't come before. They come after am, is, are. We need to understand this because we are going to compare the use of the verb be and the main verb, that is verbs in the simple present, in their word order in the sentence, where we want to see where exactly the adverb of a frequency comes. Is it before the verb or after the verb? We said so far that in the simple present, we have to have our adverb before the verb. Sally always goes to school, or Sally goes always to school. We have basically seen that the adverb has to come immediately before the verb, in most of the cases, of course. And here we have totally different idea that the adverb of a frequency comes after the verb. It follows the verb. It does not come before the verb. It comes after the verb. So the example that we have here is Tom is always late. So if you look at this sentence, Tom is the subject, is the main verb, while always the adverb comes after the verb. It follows the verb. It is basically coming after the verb rather than before the verb. So Tom is the subject, is one form of verb to be, and always is the adverb. It is coming after the verb to be, while in the case of the simple present main verb, we have seen that the adverb comes before the verb rather than after the verb. Another example, Sally is usually in the office. We don't usually say Sally usually is. It is Sally is usually in the office. So the adverb comes after. The adverb follows the verb. They rarely visit us. Do we have a mistake here? Again, they rarely visit us. The verb visit has to be without the s, because we have a plural subject, which is the pronoun they. So they rarely visit us, rather than they rarely visits us. Okay, so they rarely visit us. Why is that? Because the subject is plural and the verb has to have no s at the end. So they rarely visit us. So in the case of main verb, the adverb comes before. In the case of verb to be, the adverb comes after. So Sally is usually. They rarely visit us. So the adverb comes before the verb. Now this is again to remind us, frequency adverbs come before the main verbs. Subject, frequency adverb, then the main verb. Tom sometimes comes late. So if you look at this sentence, here we said Tom followed by the verb, while here Tom followed by the adverb, which means the verb here is followed by the adverb always, while the verb here is preceded, is basically where the adverb comes before the verb rather than after the verb. Moving to the following exercise, which is on page number 50, it's exercise number 9. Here we have a sentence that contains verb to be, and a similar to that sentence, another sentence which contains a simple present verb, a main verb rather than verb to be. We will see how an adverb like always will be added in this sentence. So in the case of is, we will find an, for example, an is on time for class. We want to see where exactly you can add this always. Where can you get this adverb in this sentence? And if the sentence contains a main verb like comes in this sentence, we also are going to see how always is going to come before the verb, while in the case of verb to be, it comes after the verb. So in the case of verb to be, it is before, it is after. In the case of the main verb, it is before. Okay, Anne is on time for a class. Anne comes to class on time. If you look at the first solution, Anne is always on time for class. So what we have here, we have the adverb always. It is coming after the main verb is rather than before. What about this sentence? Anne comes to class on time. Anne always comes to class on time. So where did we get the adverb? It is before the verb. Comes, always comes. Is always. So this is showing us that in the case of main verb simple present, we have the adverb before the main verb, while in the case of verb to be, it is after verb to be. Moving to the following pair of sentences where we need to add the adverb never. It snows in my hometown. It is very cold in my hometown. Look at the first sentence. We have the verb snows, simple present verb, main verb. Now we know that the adverb of frequency comes before the verb, so we can say it never snows in my hometown. While when we have verb to be, it is very cold in my hometown, it is never very cold in my hometown. Look at the first one. It never snows in my hometown. The adverb never comes before the verb. It is never very cold in my town. So the adverb never comes after the verb to be is rather than before. Okay, another pair of example. The adverb we want to show here is usually. Bob is at home. Bob stays at home. Look at the first sentence contains is. The adverb has to come always after the verb is. So Bob is usually at home. Bob is usually at home. While when we say Bob stays at home, here the verb stay is a main verb, a simple present verb. The adverb comes before stays, so Bob usually stays at home. Finally, the adverb seldom. His classmates are at the library. So the verb of this sentence is verb to be, are. Tom studies at the library. What do we have here? We have a main verb, a simple present verb. We want to see where to place the adverb seldom. His classmates are seldom at the library. His classmates are seldom at the library. Tom studies at the library. Tom seldom studies at the library. The adverb seldom comes after the main verb. Okay, now let's move to the second point in our chapter, where we need to understand that some verbs ends are basically different from one another. So we have a group of words, a group of verbs that when they end in CH, SH, O, X, Z, they usually have an ES at the end rather than an S, when of course the subject is a third person subject. So we add es for those verbs that end in sh, ch, double s, x, and o. So the example that we have here is the verb bush. If you look at the end, we have sh. The verb watch, ch. Kiss, that is double s, fix, x, and o in the case of go. Now, if we have any verb that end in one of those sounds, or basically letters or spellings, basically the verb does not have an s only, but it is going to have an es. So he pushes the door. He pushes the door. We did not add an s only, we added an es. So why is that? Because the verb ends in an sh. Now, this, as I said, applies only when the verb is preceded by he, she, it, a third person singular subject. While if the verb is preceded by they, which is not a third person singular subject, there is no change for the verb. You do not really add anything, because we said when it is a third person plural pronoun, there is nothing added to the verb. You do this only when you have a third person singular pronoun. Watch. If you look at the end of the verb, watch, it ends with ch. So any verb that ends with ch and the subject is a third person singular pronoun, you have to add an es at the end rather than only s. So she watches the TV. She watches the TV. But if we have a plural subject, we watch the TV. Similarly for the others, Sally kisses her mother. The children kiss their mother. He fixes the broken machine. We fix the broken machine. Nadia goes to school. They go to school. So we add an es to the end of those verbs because they have a special ending. They end in one of those letters, as you have seen in this example. Okay, now sometimes we have different verbs that ends with y. Now we need to understand, sometimes we add an s to those verbs and sometimes we delete this s, we delete the y and add an ies. We need to understand how and when do we do that. Okay, the simple rule says when we have a verb that ends in y and it is preceded by a vowel, we just add s. Can we say that again? Yes. If we have a verb like play and this verb ends in y, now we look at the letter before the y. If it is a vowel, like A, O, E, if it is a vowel, we just add an S to the end. So there is no change to the form of the verb. Sally plays football. Now sometimes when we have a verb that ends in Y and it is not preceded by a vowel, but it is preceded by a consonant, anything that is not vowel. For example, the verb study, if you look at the verb study, it ends in Y, but before the Y we have a D sound. This D sound is not a vowel, it is a consonant. In this case, if you have a third person singular subject, you delete the Y and you replace it with I, then you add ES. It's a little bit confusing. However, you look at the verb. If it has a Y letter at the end, you look at the sound or you look at the letter before the Y. If this letter is a consonant, you delete the Y and replace it with I, then you add your ES. If the verb ends in Y but it is not preceded by a consonant, it is preceded by a vowel, you just add an S. There is nothing you delete, there is nothing you replace, and so on and so forth. So the example that we have here, Sally studies English. Why did we change the Y into IES? Because the word study is preceded by a consonant. The letter Y is preceded by a consonant, which is the D sound. So we delete the Y and replace it by I, then we add ES. So Sally studies English. Now this is an exercise on page number 63. This is exercise number 15, which shows the difference between the endings of the verb. It says complete the chart with the correct form of the verb. Look at what we have here. We have the verb try. We look at this verb. it ends with Y, and the letter before the Y is an R. Now the R is a consonant, so if we have a third person subject, it means that we are going to delete the Y, replace it with an I, then we add our ES. So look at this, he tries. So what happened to the verb? We deleted the Y, then we replaced it with I, then we added ES. Again, we study. She studies. Similarly, they fly. A bird, which is a third person singular, flies. Why did we change fly into flies? We have Y at the end of the verb, preceded by an L, and this L is a consonant. So we have to change the Y into I and add ES. A bird flies. I stay awake. Ball stays awake. What do we do with this verb? Look at this verb. It is the verb stay. This verb ends in Y, that's true. But if you look before the Y letter, you will find a vowel sound rather than a consonant. So we have A. So we have a vowel. In this case, you cannot delete the Y and replace it with I. You just add an S because you have a vowel here. Ball stays awake. Next sentence, I play music. So the verb play also ends in Y, but it is preceded by a vowel. My friend plays music. Next. Here we have the how to make the simple present into negative, and the idea is very simple. In the case of negative, where we have a sentence in the simple present, and you want to change the sentence into negative, you want to negate the sentence, we have to use two helping verbs, or basically we have to use do and does. We use does when the verb is preceded by he, she, it. So the S in does is basically the S that you add to the end of the verb. Now, after you use the do or does, you add not. You insert the negation particle not. So as you can see here, we use the helping verb do or does followed by not. Why? In negative sentences. When we want to make a sentence negative, we have to use do or does. Then after do or does, we add not, which is the negation particle. Now the question, how can I know whether I am going to use do or does? You use do if the subject is I, we, they, you. In other words, you use does when you have your subject he, she, it, when it is a third person singular pronoun. This is an example showing all those cases. So he does not drink coffee. He does not drink coffee. What happened to the sentence? The sentence is in the negative. Why it is in the negative? Because we have he does not. We have does and not. Now if you notice, the helping verb does is coming with he because it is a third person singular subject. Now the main verb drink comes after not, is not having any S. There is no S at here. So we say he does not drink coffee. We cannot say he does not drinks coffee. The S, which should be in drink, has gone to the helping verb S, does. So it becomes does. Now the same thing applies to she and it. She does not drink coffee. So does not. The verb drink has nothing attached to it. It does not drink coffee. Again, the same thing. When we have he, she, it, we use does followed by not, followed by the base form of the verb without anything attached to it. While in the rest of the pronouns, I, we, you, they, we use do not. Do followed by not. And again, you need to pay attention. The verb after do or does should always be in the base form. You cannot say drinks. You cannot say drank. It has always to be verb 1 in the base form. Okay, so this is bring us to the end of this lecture. The simple present is very longly discussed in your book, but we try to pick and choose the most important issues related to the simple present. In the following lecture, where we study the present continuous, we have to always refer back to the present simple or the simple present to compare the present continuous with the present simple. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.